Hello, NZ5 here. This is an idea for a new video series where I will try out builds and let you know if I believe they are good or just look good, i.e. bait. My first build this league was the Chaos Fire build, made popular by Garatha mostly, but also Captain Lance. I might make a video on it, but the TLDR is it is not bait, but also not really OP either. On no budget or in campaign clearing, I'd give it a B plus, A minus. Though watching Garatha and Lance play it, it does seem to scale up well as you invest more into it. You are definitely better off playing Essence Drain Contagion until you can invest a bit into the build and get your crit chance up. I didn't take the build very far, only into yellow maps before I rerolled to try out some other builds. It just felt a little clunky for my taste. As for the Thorns build, the namesake, the title of the video, I'll start off, I'll cut to the chase, no clickbait. I don't think it's bait. Uh, Let me show you some footage from the interludes and early mapping that I've done on the build. It is very much a solid build that you can put together for next to nothing and clear the campaign quite easily. It absolutely requires one unique, Crown of the Pale King, but you can get that very cheap. They start at like 1 to 2x, and you get a well-rolled one for like 10C or less. There is another unique that is borderline required, Briar Patch, the boots. They add a lot to our Thorns base crit, and it's your best in slot boots. For leveling, there's also Dreadfist, is a great unique gloves to use, but in the end game you'll replace them. The crown and the briar patch, however, you're going to use those forever. So I'm normally very skeptical about Thorns builds, as my buddy Cubs can attest. He was planning to do this build from the start, and I thought he was baiting himself. Turns out I was completely wrong, as he's coasted into tier 15s with no issue. That's what made me want to check it out, and so far I'm only in like tier 6s with this build. Despite having pretty terrible gear, it's been smooth sailing. In the footage, I'm still wearing all the same gear I've had since about level 50, and I'm between 62 and 68 in the footage. Right here, we're showing some of the blood priests. This was the last interlude I did. I did them in order, basically. And just finish this guy off real quick. And then I jumped into the... I should have been jumping into those beams the whole time because they will reflect damage to the bosses. Here I'm showing off the gear that I'm wearing, which was not great. I think since then I've upgraded the belt and shield, but that's about it. And then this was the pass-through I was using. I had an okay time loss jewel. That's why I kind of showed that one off, but really you could buy that one for a couple X. This is what the clearing looks like once you're in maps. And I'll go over some of the core interactions at play here. Because unlike when you hear the idea of Thorns build, you normally think that just means you only do damage when they hit you. And you do a lot of damage when things hit you, but there's a couple supports here at play that are letting us do our Thorns damage when we attack, right? Which, if you notice here in the top left corner, oh, let me hide my cam for just a second here. Up here, you'll see when I get hit, these icons pop up, and then as I attack, the number goes down on one of them, and I'll show you what that is in just a moment after this footage. But that's when I get hit for a certain number of attacks after we're taking our Thorns damage and applying it when we hit something. Actually, that rare there, let's see if it happens again on this rare. There's one little issue that sometimes comes up. You're going to stun enemies pretty quick. And then when they're stunned, they're not hitting you, so then it's not triggering those supports to do more damage. So there's a few little times that come up that's a little bit awkward where you stop doing as good damage. And I've been experimenting with a couple things to try and rectify that, which I'll go over here in just a moment. But first and foremost, let me show you the core interactions of the build. The supports that make this all possible, the main one here is going to be barbs. Support skills deal your Thorns damage on their next 6 hits after you retaliate with Thorns. Retaliate meaning something hit you that you applied Thorns damage to it back. So whenever that happens, this support, for the next 6 hits, it will add your Thorns damage to the attack. Then there's another one here, Quill Burst. Similar thing, retaliate with Thorns, and then it's just the next 3 hits, and it triggers an ability called Thorns, or called Quill Burst, excuse me. But the Quill Burst deals your Thorns damage in an area, but it can't hit the target this was triggered from. So it's whatever mob you're attacking, you're not going to do the Quill Burst to them, but you can do it around them. So it's great for clearing, but it's not the best for single target then, right? So at times I've been experimenting with Rake not having Quill Burst on it and doing some other stuff to try and make Rake do a little bit better damage whenever we're not triggering Thorns, but I don't know. I've gone back and forth on it. One of the other things I'm doing is on Quilburst, on Rake right now is I'm using Barb's 3, which ever since they added new supports, some of the supports have ranks 1, 2, 3, and the number 3 is not always an upgrade over rank 2. Like Barb's 3 here, it only lets you do the Thorns damage to the next attack, but it does double the damage, right? So you get hit, normal Barb's 2, it's going to apply Thorns on 6 attacks. Barb's 3, it's only going to apply it on 1 attack, but it's going to do double damage. So I've been using Rapid Assault, clearing, and then every so often doing a single Rake. So I'll be hitting, and if I see a tanky rare, I try and hit Rake on that one, and then go back to doing more Rapid Assaults. The next most important ability is going to be Scavenge Plating, and that's because if you read this line here, you get more Thorns per Scavenge Plating. It's 10 stacks. The exact amount of Thorns is going to depend on the level of the Scavenge Plating that you've got. After that, the next most important things are going to be Magma Barrier, just for the innate block chance, and Resonating Shield. Resonating Shield's interesting in that it's a channeled ability, but while you're channeling it, you're considered blocking, and it breaks armor, which then triggers the Scavenge Plating. And I'm also messing around with putting Quill Burst on this. I'm still testing that out if that really works the way I'm hoping it does. But initially, if you get into a pack of monsters, you'll do the Resonating Shield to try and get your initial Scavenge Plating stacks started. And then after that, you're basically just going to be doing Rapid Assault to clear everything. Most of the other skills are kind of optional or to your personal preference. Fortifying Cry is really nice. Extra tankiness. I've got Second Wind on here. Second Wind rank 3, just for a bit of an extra heal. Kind of a little bit of a panic button, maybe. Time of Need is a great persistent buff to have. However, one thing is you're going to need to watch your spirit, depending on what gear you have, you'll want to add Thorn Skin supports into some of these spirit buffs you've got. The Thorn Skin will increase Thorns damage, but it costs 20 Spirit. Now, there is a rank 2 Thorn Skin, but it costs 40 Spirit, and it only does 70% increased Thorns damage. So in terms of Spirit efficiency, the first rank is the best, because you can put these do stack, meaning you can put one of them on all of your buffs, and they'll each stack, right? So until you get to the point where you've got one on all of them, and you're just like running out of gem slots, it really doesn't make sense to use the rank 2 at all. Then some of the other skills, Leap Slam can be nice for getting out of a pack or something like that, but you'll need to make sure that you've got some other weapons that you'll not a spear in your offhand. Otherwise, you can't use that. And then Hammer the Gods. Don't pay attention to this. This is just something I've been experimenting with. Like I said, when you get into those situations where you stun the monster and they're not triggering your thorns, I'm trying to find something to do some extra damage in those situations. So while the pros of the build are that it's very tanky and does solid damage, especially for clearing or on bosses. Some bosses that have things that hit really fast, it'll be absolutely hilarious how much damage you can do to those. But like I said, sometimes it gets a little awkward on really tanky rares or certain kinds of bosses, depending on how they hit. If they don't hit very often or they hit real slow. Um, but you're tanky enough that really, if you're patient, it doesn't matter. You'll end up killing them anyways. But so that said, considering how cheap it is to put together, this is a great build. Those little situations aside, overall, it's a great build. really the weapon almost doesn't matter. The damage of the weapon does not matter. All you really want is a very high attack speed. And then this spear isn't even that great because what I really want instead of those prefixes is, gain damage as extra, like gain percent of fizz as extra fire or something like that, because those will apply to the thorns. But these flat damage, flat cold and flat lightning and whatnot, those aren't. Those are only applying to the actual ability itself. But um, our abilities are not doing that much damage. Like rapid assault is hitting for 279 on average, whereas if you look at my thorns right now, my thorns are 1711 to 3469, right? That's like 2400 ish on average, 2500. So, the actual ability is not even doing 10% of my damage. So, the one thing I'm a little unsure of is how well it can scale for Uber Pinnacle content, right? Like the max tier of the Uber Pinnacle content. The endgame version of this build, which I'm working towards right now, is going to do a swap to Avatar Fire, where you take Avatar Fire, and now you can, Avatar Fire right here. Now you can scale your Thorns with increased fire damage and, Fire Pen and exposure and stuff, right? And there's some nodes here you get. Um, you might anoint some of the things like this, gain percent of damage as extra fire. Those will apply to anything that's like a generic damage, those will apply. So some of these nodes here might be anoints that you would consider doing then because you can't travel all the way up there. But there's a handful of fire nodes here that also help. But the main thing you need for that swap though is Chernabug's Pillar Shield, mainly for the line. You gain 1% of. Actually, wait, let me make sure I find it and read exactly. It's gain 1% of damage as fire damage per 1% chance to block. So if I had that shield right now, my block chance is 52%. So I'd get 52% of damage as extra fire. That would just be 52% more damage at this point. That is something that you very much need before you do the whole avatar to fire swap. That's what I'd be working on next. And I believe the build can kill all the content in the game, including the top end Ubers. But I think somewhere around there is when you start to hit a wall, where the damage, you know, once you get tier one thorns on all your pieces of gear, right? Then you can't really gain any more flat. I still got tier three here, but I've got tier one on the shield and belts. I can get a bit more there, but once I do that, that's going to be basically all of the flat damage I can get for the rest of the game. Then you're looking to try and scale it a few other ways, but you kind of have limited options. So just doing rough math, I believe it can kill all that content, but it might start to hit a little bit of a ceiling. There is a creator, Calterac, who is known for this build specifically, and despite some drama in the last few days where I disagree with most of his points, I can't deny that he is the authority on this Thorns build. He's been doing it since before point 3, and it got a lot better in this patch with a lot of the support changes and everything that was added. So if you do it, love the build, you've gone through campaign, early maps, whatever, and you want to go all the way to, Uber content, I'd probably check out his content then if you want to take the build that far. In any case, just wanted to go over the core interactions build and say that I don't think the build is bait. I think it's very tanky. It's very survivable, which is something that's super nice compared to a lot of other builds. You can face tank 90% of the things in the game. Even some stuff that are one shots on almost every other build I've played did like half my health. And then with the leech you get, which by the way, that's one of the best interactions. And I'm going to link a POB in the notes below here with some of the suggestions for the passive tree as you go through the axe and everything. But one of the first things I got was the Thorns damage leeches life, and then percentage of leeches instant. There's some hilarious moments where I'd get surrounded by stuff, but then I'd get hit, take a little damage, Thorns reflect, leech it all back, right? It was like I was invulnerable. No matter how much was hitting me, they're all dying, and then I'm staying full health. But in any case, thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed the content, a thumbs up or a comment helps me out with the old YouTube algorithm. Also, you can find me streaming on Twitch under the name NZ5, and I'm always happy to answer any questions you might have, whether it's about this build or anything else. I think that about wraps it up for this video, so good luck. and I hope you drop a mirror.